Welcome to the Mylers podcast, cybersecurity news from an analyst and a noob.
I'm Garrett, your analyst.
And I'm Julie, the noob.
And our first story this week comes by way of Unit 42 at Palo Alto Networks. And they're reporting on a new Linux variant of a malware called PingPull.
Ooh,
yeah, so last year they, that's fun to say, isn't it? PingPull.
Francisco, that's fun to say. Francisco.
Last year they reported on the Windows version of PingPull, which I believe it's named because it uses ICMP tunneling. ICMP is a relatively innocent protocol where you'll send a ping or an echo request to a host to see if it's active, and if it's configured to do so, it'll send an echo reply to say, "Yep, I'm here."
Oh, I've heard of this before.
Ping. And but the standard for ICMP, I believe it's RFC 972 or 792. The internet will correct me, I'm sure.
Do it, guys.
They don't specify or limit the amount of bytes in the payload, so in the data. So malicious hackers figured out they could just stuff it full of command and control C2 commands and
big ping.
exfiltrate data. But this version, the Linux variant, doesn't appear to be as aptly named because it appears just to use HTTPS, which is your basic encrypted web traffic.
Yeah, but they didn't want to be left out, Linux. They wanted their own version of PingPull.
Yeah, and they associated this malware with a Chinese state-sponsored threat group called Gallium.
Gallium?
Yeah, we know Gallium, huh?
Like this Gallium right here?
Oh.
What is this?
Yeah, so Gallium is, we have a homeschool, so we just have Gallium lying around, but yours is liquidy and mine is all solid. Why is that, Julie?
Well, because Gallium is a metal with a very low melting point.
Yeah, as a homeschool teacher, you're not a noob when it comes to chemistry. I am. So all the chemistry nerds can put the atomic number of gallium in the comments or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, science!
The name that Unit 42 calls them is alloy Taurus.
I guess that makes sense because gallium's a metal.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a marking thing though. Why not just stick with gallium? That's what they called them when they on their report last year when they were reporting.
They're rebranding.
So I don't know. Everyone's got to have their own special name for threat actor groups. But either way, they did a good job of breaking down the infrastructure used by Gallium, and they associated it with this command and control server that had a domain name that was associated with this IP address. But for one day in April last year, it was associated with a different IP address that they had previously tracked to Gallium.
So, sloppy. Got him.
Yeah, got him. And then they found a backdoor that they've been previously tracked and associated with Gallium called Swords 2033. And they found a second version of that backdoor that was associated with a different IP address. Now that IP address was mapped to this domain that was spoofing the South African military.
Oh.
And the Africa, Southeast Asia, and European telecommunications is a common target for Gallium. So, but what's interesting is that previously, from like December 22 to February 23, this IP address was mapped to a soft ether VPN domain, and Gallium was previously is known. That's another one of their signatures, is they're known to use soft ether VPN.
Leaving a trail of breadcrumbs right to you guys, Gallium.
Yeah.
I like bread. So, what's this virus total on here? 31 out of 61. What's that mean?
I just threw that in there because out of curiosity, I took the hash that Unit 42 used and uploaded to Virus Total to mark it as malware. For the Linux version, since it's relatively new, I was curious how many antivirus software correctly identified it as malicious. And even though they have submitted it almost 2 months ago, we're still at about just over half.
It's not great.
Have identified it as malicious. No, but I mean, it's not too concerning. I guess all the big players like Microsoft and Google and Avast and McAfee, they've all got it. So, but just as a reminder, pick maybe if you have a large organization you're protecting, maybe don't go for the free antivirus.
There's a reason it's free.
Another kind of common characteristic of Gallium is that they'll target vulnerable and unpatched web servers like Windows, Microsoft IIS. And there was this CVE that was associated with what they a malware they called China Chopper web shell. So they I just out of curiosity, I looked up that 2021 CVE, and according to Shodan, there's over 4,000 vulnerable hosts to that China Chopper web shell, mostly in Russia, United States, China, Japan, and Germany. So remember to patch your stuff, or else the Chinese Gallium group might get you. So our second and last story for this week's episode comes from Bitdefender, and they're reporting on a new malware called BellaCiao.
Oh, BellaCiao. Making me want some pasta.
It is Italian, yeah. Apparently it's an Italian folk song. And they're associating it with an Iranian state-sponsored threat group called Charming Kitten.
Oh, kittens?
Yeah,
Where?
right there.
Oh my goodness.
So I created my own graphic. I looked online. I didn't really like any of them. The one that I saw that was clearly a full-grown cat, not a kitten. So I created my own, and not to be outdone, Mandiant has their own graphic, but they call it APT35.
So creative.
Well, the numbers are efficient.
Okay, efficient and boring.
But the Bitdefender says that that the initial access vector for BellaCiao is currently unknown, but they know that their primary target is Microsoft Exchange Service, and based on their MOA, they kind of suggest a couple OWA SSRF or Outlook Web Access server-side request forgery vulnerabilities that they may be using for initial access. SSRF or server-side request forgery is where the attacker gets the victim server, tricks it to make a request to either an internal or external service that somehow helps the attacker with the kill chain. So whether it leaks credential information or something like that. And the first thing, once BellaCiao is loaded onto the victim machine, the first thing it does is sends a PowerShell command to disable Microsoft Defender.
Ooh, smart.
Antivirus, yeah. First thing, try to kill the defenses.
The shield is down.
One thing I really think is interesting is how BellaCiao communicates with its command and control server. So with PingPull, we talked about how it at least the Windows version used ICMP tunneling because it's kind of a commonly used and innocent seeming protocol. DNS or domain name service is even more critical to internet traffic, because basically you as humans, we don't memorize IP addresses. We put in domain names, and then that domain name gets sent to a request is sent to a DNS server for its matching IP address, so that the computer can go to the IP address. Well, what BellaCiao is doing is it doesn't really need to know the IP address of a domain name, but it sends a domain name to through a DNS request to the C2 server. But the domain name that it's sends is telling the C2 server, tells the C2 server where it's coming from, what victim it's coming from. And then the response, the IP address that the C2 server responds back with isn't really a legitimate IP address. It's simply decoded. It's like it's compared to a hard-coded string or IP address that BellaCiao has, and it compares the response to what it has, and based on the comparison, starting from the last octet, so a 32-bit IPv4 IP address has 4 octets. So starting from the last one will say whether or not to deploy the web shell. Then this second to last will tell it what folder the malware is located in, and then the second octet will tell it what subfolder, and the first octet will tell it the name of the malware. Wow. So it's basically encoding. It's like
speaking in code, and then the other guy's got a cipher, and they determine it. Do you remember those ones where it was open to page 23, and it's the second line and the third word, and that's the first line? That's what it reminds me of, those book codes. Do you remember that? Page 32. Oh, third line.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Yeah. So just
cool
kind of an interesting crafty, sneaky way to
Very sneaky.
obfuscate
I am very, very sneaky, sir.
the command and control traffic, because if you're looking at it from the outside, you're like, oh, it's just asking for the IP address for this
Like everyone does.
domain, and
yeah,
normal. But
not normal.
well, that sums up our cybersecurity news. Let's go to our Beyond the Scope segment, where you get to talk about something not related to cybersecurity.
So I thought I'd bring up someone who's in the news lately, one of your old heroes, Bam Margera. Do you remember Bam Margera?
From JackA.
Yes, from JackA.
Yeah, I wouldn't say he was a hero of
No.
mine. I can't. Sometimes I know.
Can't put his name to his
I
face,
get,
probably.
I get them mixed up. He's not the one that kind of talks like this now and lives in a van and
No.
still skates.
That's
Okay.
Steve-O.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm reunited with Bam Margera.
He does still skate, I'm sure, but Bam Margera was a professional skateboarder and was on the original JackA. But he's just been in the news lately because there's been a lot of accusations against him, but the most recent being that his brother called the cops on him for domestic disturbance, saying he threatened to attack him and that he was in a rage and a mental state. And then when the cops showed up, Bam had ran away and they couldn't find him. He was on the run for a while with a warrant out for his arrest. Just turned himself in, though, and is countersuing his brother for defamation because his brother went on a Twitter rampage claiming that Bam is on meth and he's crazy and attacked him and destroyed his stuff and did a bunch of other obscene things. And Bam's trying to come out and be like, no, he's taking drug tests to prove that he's not. But there's a lot of evidence from some previous behavior just the last couple months that might show some of this may be true. He's been struggling, arrest for public intoxication, things like
Having
that.
a hard time.
He is having a hard time. And I think it just shines a light on, people that we grew up, I was joking, maybe not idolizing, but definitely like looking up to or emulating a little bit, maybe. Everyone, I think, can admit they tried to attempt a JackA stunt once or twice.
Yeah, I do have a distinct memory of me standing in a shopping cart wearing a black hefty bag for some reason and getting my friends pushing me into a curb and me rolling into the grass.
Yeah.
So it's sad to see them
It is.
struggle like this. And it's unfortunately, it seems to kind of be more the exception
norm.
to the rule, to have like a healthy, well-balanced life without any sort of scandal or drama. When you have fame and money, that seems to be a struggle for a lot of people. But we're rooting for you, Bam.
Yeah. It's hard living your life under a microscope, I think, too, or a magnifying glass, whatever it is. And hopefully, family isn't taking advantage of that. Hopefully you can get the access to the care that you need. It looks like maybe we're getting a turnaround, but it's just, like you said, one of those things that we see with a lot of famous people over time.
Yeah. Well, we're rooting for you, Bam. Hope things work out for you. Things get better. But thanks for the blast from the past from JackA. This is a family-friendly podcast, so we'll say JackA.
You know what show we're actually talking about.
But that wraps up this week's episode of the Cyber Mylers. Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks for tuning in.